60 seconds. That's all the warning I got before my world got cracked open, bolt cutters snapping through chain link, that jagged metallic sound ripping straight through the Dallas dawn, turning what was supposed to be my peaceful golden years into a war zone just like that. Fog still hugging the ground, sun barely up, coffee, not even cold yet, and here come three guys built like bulldozers, all puffed up in code enforcement vests, but anybody with a pair of eyes could see they were just muscle in disguise. And at their helm, Victoria Sterling. If you've never had the pleasure, just imagine the ice queen of real estate, high on control, low on soul, with a streak of ambition cold enough to put winter on notice. This was the president of the Pines HOA, the woman who fined me $500 just because Spartacus, my rooster, dared to announce sunrise. That's 44 months of her little mind games, fake complaints, bogus animal control calls, phony inspections, letters with enough legalese to make your head spin, always one step shy of lighting a match under my house just to get her way. I watched from behind my curtains, heart thumping not from fear but from the kind of electric anticipation you get right before you spring a trap you've been laying for years. Because see, while Victoria was busy trying to bulldoze my life, I was quietly collecting every slip-up, every trespass, every threat, turning her own tricks against her. And what she didn't know was that some old country boys have friends with badges. Friends who can smell corruption a mile off. Name's Elias Vance. If you'd asked me 6 months back, I would have told you retirement meant mornings in the garden and afternoons fixing fences, maybe a little bourbon at sunset. After 30 years running high-voltage lines for contractors who'd trade their own grandmas for $1, I finally found my slice of heaven, 3 acres out in Whispering Pines. Spent my life savings on that patch of dirt. The previous owner, Arthur Pendleton, shook my hand and promised me the place was bulletproof, protected by old agricultural covenants. That handshake felt as solid as the porch oak. First month. Absolute bliss. Waking up to hay and earth, listening to Spartacus crow tending a greenhouse that smelled like wet soil and Hope Real tomatoes. Not that grocery store nonsense, but you know how it goes. Paradise always attracts snakes. Mine showed up in a tailored white blazer, platinum blonde hair yanked back so tight you'd think she was prepping for battle. Victoria Sterling standing at my gate at 7 a.m., her smile all sharp edges. She told me the neighborhood was evolving. Translation, she wanted the look of rural Texas, but none of the actual rural life, no tractors, no roosters, just the illusion. I was the last holdout. You have to understand her type. She wasn't just selling homes, she was selling a fantasy to rich city folks. People who liked the idea of the country but wanted everything neat, quiet, and sterile. To them, a rooster's song is noise pollution and a tractor is a war crime. Within 2 weeks, the paper cuts started $200 noise violation for Spartacus, doing what roosters do, animal control showing up expecting a disaster, but leaving more confused than when they arrived, code enforcers trying to invent commercial violations out of thin air. But Victoria's real masterpiece that came at the monthly HOA meeting. She packed the community center with neighbors lured in by Eleanor Bishop's homemade pie, then rolled out a PowerPoint called Strategic Value Enhancements. She projected an aerial map of my land, giant red arrows labeling my barns and greenhouse as priority elimination targets. She spun this yarn about how bulldozing my farm would raise their property values 12%. Eleanor tried to push back, God bless her, but Victoria just said, sentiment doesn't pay the mortgage. That night, walking home under Texas stars, listening to my hens clucking, something in me snapped. I was done playing defense. 30 years in utilities, navigating bureaucracy and blueprints, and this lady thought she could outmaneuver me. She was about to get a crash course in country stubbornness. The very next Saturday, Spartacus lost his mind at dawn. I rolled out of bed to find 3 surveyors trespassing, measuring my boundaries, Victoria watching from her idling Lexus across the street. Now I know my way around a plat map, and I could tell right away they were breaking a dozen notification laws. I played dumb, let them finish, let them pile up the violations. Monday, I headed to the county registrar's office, $40 and a couple hours in paperwork. Hell, later I had every deed and covenant ever filed for Whispering Pines spread out on my kitchen table. That's when I found my ace. Turns out Victoria's own McMansion was a monument to hypocrisy, illegal sprinkler system buried deep in public land. Backyard pergola, never approved violations everywhere. So I spent $800 for a state-licensed surveyor to map her encroachments. Not 2 days later, I got a call from Victoria, her voice like a cracked whip, threatening me with every agency in the book if I didn't back off. I just sipped my bourbon and reminded her that illegal builds attract exactly the sort of attention she'd been sending my way. Her counterstrike was swift. A sandblasted order taped to my door, $500 per day, in fines for unauthorized agricultural expansion, doctored photos with circles drawn around 30-year-old barns, and a wave of panic through the neighborhood. That's when Eleanor called scared but mad as hell, said Victoria was telling folks my chickens carried diseases, my land was toxic, whipping up enough fear to get 12 signatures for an emergency tribunal to shut me down before I could blink. Did I panic? Nope. I went back to the courthouse, dug even deeper. That's when I found her real Achilles heel, unpermitted septic illegal kitchen additions, about $8,000 in fines waiting to happen. I showed the county clerk guy, nearly fell out of his chair. Meanwhile, Eleanor had secretly recorded Victoria's little slander tour, giving us the smoking gun for a defamation suit. When the emergency meeting rolled around, Eleanor and I walked in ready for war. The room was packed, 40 nervous neighbors, Victoria's lies plastered on poster boards. I laid out my blueprints, and you could see the blood drain from her face. Then Eleanor hit play on her phone, Victoria's recorded threats filling the air. People started shouting for her resignation, the supposed queen of the HOA gathering her things and fleeing into the night, her reign broken. But the real twist that came at 3 a.m. the following Saturday, a manila envelope slid under my door. Inside, a stack of emails and bank statements showed Victoria was on Vanguard Prime Development's payroll, paid $50,000 to wipe out family farms for a $15 million luxury development. And the worst part? The Judas goat who set me up was Caleb Pendleton, Arthur's own son. He'd sold me the farm knowing I was the patsy part of a scheme targeting 8 other farm families. The grief hit hard, but it burned off quick, replaced by something colder and stronger. Monday morning, I had Sheriff Brody at my kitchen table. 20 years in the saddle, his family hunted these woods. He took one look at the evidence and knew this was RICO-level crime, not neighbor drama. With Eleanor and Sarah Higgins, a horse farmer whose granddaughter was studying criminal justice, we formed a little intelligence network. Sarah wired herself for a meeting with Victoria, came back with hours of confession on tape, everything from the bribes to the timeline. To finish it, Brody and I baited the hook. I emailed Victoria, said I was beat ready to sell. She set up a private meeting, clueless she'd be stepping into a federal sting. That night she escalated, went pure evil. I came home to find my greenhouse trashed and my animals sick. Spartacus and 2 hens gasping for air. Vet said it was poisoning, same illness Victoria had been warning neighbors about. That was her last line, bioterror. I called Brody. He told me to pack a bag the FBI was in. Saturday morning, high school auditorium packed, 200 people all buzzing. Victoria up there with her high-priced lawyer tried to spin her story one last time. But when the double doors banged open and Brody walked in, flanked by the FBI, you could feel the whole room tilt. Brody read her own confessions out loud. Fraud, intimidation, conspiracy. When she tried to protest, I stood up with the vet's reports, my voice louder than I'd ever heard it, told her, and everyone in there, what real harassment looked like. The place exploded, cheers, shouts, the FBI cuffing Victoria and hauling her out. Her lawyer vanished, the crowd roaring like a football game. Karma, real and raw. 6 months on Whispering Pines is back to being a real community. Spartacus struts around like he owns the joint. My farm's protected forever, with Marcus Thorne, one of our own, as the new HOA president. Victoria. She's got 18 months in federal lockup. Vanguard Prime is finished. Caleb turned state's witness, and the civil settlement let us buy more land. Now we've got the Pendleton Vance Heritage Academy teaching local kids about real farming, honest work, and what it means to stand your ground. Sometimes at sunset, watching the kids gather eggs and the wind in the grass, I can't help but think how close we all came to losing everything. But holding firm, finding your backbone when you want to fold, that's what saved us. Not just the farm, but the heart of this place. And it leaves me wondering how many little guys out there are facing off against giant systems rigged against them. When does standing up become the only way to get justice? Or is it sometimes okay to bend the rules just to make things right? Let me know down in the comments. Where do you draw the line between order and justice? Ever fought a fight like this yourself? Drop your story, share your thoughts, because sometimes the only way the good guys win is by not giving up.